Hey there. It's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the comment, thanks. As I had expected, each of the next two shows were better. It only made sense that they would be, and with the school play out of the way, I looked forward to spending a little time with my friends at the community theater. Their production was scheduled to open 2 weeks after the school's play. The entertainment section of the Sunday newspaper had a small article about the school play. The same critic who had enjoyed our performances at the community theater last year had written it. The article stated, "The play at the high school this year was very enjoyable. Crystal Ramsey, our hometown shining star, was cast in the lead role of Irma La Douse. Miss Ramsey was, as always, a delight to watch. She gave a scintillating performance as a professional streetwalker. This role was almost the exact opposite of the prim and proper character that she portrayed at the community theater and shows the range of this talented young actress. The play also gave us an opportunity to hear Miss Ramsey sing in French. It's been a long time since my French language classes, but to my ear she was perfect. Most audience members may not have understood the words, but there was no mistaking the song's meaning as she shared the stage with Darren Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, in the role of the bumbling gendarme who becomes her pimp, was her co-star. The paper went on to mention the names of the rest of the cast and finished up with, Mrs. Abbott, the high school English teacher who also acts as director for the school's plays, did herself and the school proud with this year's performances. The school should consider adding an additional weekend to their performance schedule if they can continue to present performances of this caliber." I cut out the article for my scrapbook. I made sure that my homework was done right after school each day so that I could go to the theater after dinner every evening. Mom would drop me off and Debbie would bring me home. I helped out in any way that I could. Mostly I worked with the new actors, but I also stood in during rehearsals for those actors whose schedules prevented them from making it to every rehearsal. This was still an amateur production after all. Debbie was disappointed that I would only spend a few minutes with her in the car after she had taken me home each night, and that I wouldn't kiss her. I was always on guard that the wrong people might be watching. I think that she understood. I expressed a desire to visit with her at her grandmother's house after the play was over and she readily agreed. On Saturday morning, Mom and I went to the theater early to meet with Marge and Barbara. It was time to remove my faux breasts again. The itching has been getting very bothersome lately. This had been the longest time that I had worn them without having them removed for cleaning. If I looked closely, I was able to see the edges where the breast forms met my chest, which meant that the adhesive was beginning to break down. We arrived at 10 o'clock to find Barbara and Marge having tea. Marge poured a cup for Mom and I as we sat down to talk. Barbara said, "Crystal, have you had any new offers for work lately?" "No, Mom got a call from Mr. Daniels checking on my availability, but we haven't heard back. Maybe it fell through." "What was it?" "We don't know. Mr. Daniels only said that it would be in New York for about 10 days. "That could be almost anything," Marge said. "It could be a commercial, TV, or a movie. They make a lot of movies in New York these days." "It hasn't been that long since Mr. Daniels called," Mom said. "Crystal is just impatient to be acting again, and I know that she would love to visit New York." We continued to discuss acting and we talked about the theaters in New York until it was time to start working on me. I then stripped to the waist so that Barbara could remove the breast forms. "Crystal, your own breasts have grown considerably since we applied these forms," Barbara said as she looked at my chest. "I noticed that my bras and blouses seem to be getting a little tight again. I sat placidly as Mom, Marge, and Barbara appraised my chest after Barbara had removed the breast form on my left side. "I don't think that you really need the breast forms anymore," Marge said first. "Han, at the rate that you're growing, you'll need a D-cup soon if I put these back on," Barbara said. I looked down at my left breast. "But I don't want anyone to see a sudden size difference." Mom said, "We could get you a couple of padded bras that you can wear until we see what's going to happen." I agree with Barbara and Marge that you don't seem to need the forms anymore. Besides, it's still winter and you'll be covered up pretty well until spring gets here. Plenty of time to make a decision then. I thought about it while Barbara removed the other form. My right breast was at least as large as its left cousin. After cleansing my chest to remove the old adhesive, Barbara went to the costume room and returned with a bra that had a little padding. It fit comfortably and gave me close to the form that I had before. My blouse was not as tight as it had been earlier, and that was just fine with me. Everyone agreed that I looked okay without the forms, so I made the decision to leave them off. Marge had cleaned the breast forms and Barbara put them away in case I would need them again. For my own part, one would be more than happy to donate them to the theater on a permanent basis. For the first time since last summer, I would not have any fake appliances on my body. It felt wonderful. Mom and I visited with Marge and Barbara until the cast and crew started to arrive for today's rehearsal, then Mom left to run errands while I stayed behind to help out. I spent the rest of the day at the theater and Debbie took me home when the company wrapped for the day at 5 o'clock. I had promised Brad that I would go to the cinema with him tonight, so I hurried to get ready after dinner. I put on my brunette wig and completed my disguise with a loose-fitting skirt in time to greet him when he arrived. After Brad had come in and said hello to Mom and Carol, we left for the movie theater. Brad wanted to see a flick about professional football that was playing, and I didn't really care, so we sat through 2 hours of grunting and groaning that looked like it was taken directly from the nightly sports reviews. In between scenes on the football field were scenes that made an attempt to add a little drama and human interest to the movie. It didn't make it. After the movie, we went to a pizza place. Several of Brad's football teammates and their dates were there, and we fell in that group, I with the girls, and Brad with the guys. At 11, we left for home, where Brad and I spent some time in his 4x4 in front of the house until it was time for me to go in. My Sunday morning bath was the first that I had taken without having the breast forms attached since July. Afterwards, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and examined my breasts. I had seen plenty of bare breasts during the last 6 months and I didn't see any difference with mine, except that they were on me. Some others were larger and some were smaller, and I wondered how much larger mine would get. I was already larger than Carol. She was only a B cup. The sensation of contact with the actual skin was wonderful, and I was glad to finally be rid of the faux breasts. As I handled the breasts, the nipple changed shape and grew more rigid. I didn't feel any sensation in my belly, but my breasts were reacting to the touching. I stopped what I was doing when I heard Mom in the hallway and I began to get dressed. My usual apparel, consisting of a tight skirt and blouse over a corset, plus 4-inch heels, was required since I was going out as Crystal instead of my brunette identity. By noon I was at the theater and the actors were already gathering inside when I arrived. Today would be the last full rehearsal before the dress rehearsals started on Tuesday. There wasn't really any place that I would rather be. I didn't even have to be performing. I just wanted to be around it. I wondered what that said about me. Once the rehearsal was underway, I sneaked off to see Barbara in the wardrobe department. I found her making some alterations to one of the costumes. "Hi honey, come in and pull up a chair," she said as I entered. "Hi Barb. Whose costume?" It's Rick's. He ripped the underarm when he reached up. I'll triple stitch it and I guarantee it won't rip in the same place again. She smiled at me as she put out her cigarette. After some more small talk I said, Barb, could I ask a favor? Can I wear that dress that you loaned me last summer? I want to wear it to the premiere on Friday. Sure, hon, I haven't altered it so it should still fit. Well, I did want you to alter it a little. Last year it was so tight that I couldn't even walk in it. I had to waddle for my date with Debbie. I'd like you to let it out a little. Also, I have a little more behind now so I'll need a little room back there also. No problem, hon, let me get it and we'll start working on it. Barbara was a whiz. Within an hour the alterations were finished. I modeled the dress and it was perfect after Barbara tightened my corset just a little. The skirt was still a little tight but I could walk easily in it now. I also borrowed a pair of matching opera-length gloves and a purse. Barbara set the outfit aside so that I could pick it up before I left. I thanked her and returned to watch the rehearsal. They were just starting the second act when I sat down. Apparently one of the scenes in the first act hadn't been going to Mr. Tucker's satisfaction, so they had spent a lot of time working on that. Mr. Tucker plopped into the seat next to mine a couple of minutes after I sat down. I got spoiled having you with us all the time last summer. I've really missed not having you here to help out with this play. I'm sorry. I couldn't refuse to be in the school play since one of my teachers is the drama coach. I quite understand. I'm just being selfish. You were an excellent assistant director and it took a lot of the load off my shoulders. We made a good team with you up on the stage showing them what I meant when I gave directions. I could concentrate better on the overall scene. I hope that you'll be available for our play this summer. That appears likely. I haven't had any offers for paid work since the series ended. They'll come. You have the best agent in the business working for you. You can bet that there will be quality roles in your future. I hope so. We turned our full attention to the stage. One of the actors had tripped and fallen. He was one of the new people. He got up and started to apologize. Mr. Tucker said loudly, "No, no, no. This is supposed to be a live performance. If you make a mistake, just recover and carry on. Don't start apologizing to the audience." The young actor took the not too subtle hint and returned to character after one of the others cued him. I noticed with some satisfaction that Regina, the new actress that I had spent a lot of time with, was doing quite well. I sat with Mr. Tucker through the rest of the play. He only stopped it twice to change something that he felt wasn't working. At the end of the rehearsal, the cast and crew began leaving. Mr. Tucker looked at me and said, "So, my dear Crystal, what do you think?" I think that it's pretty good. The timing is a little off in places, but overall they're doing a good job. At least they all seem to have their lines down cold. Yes, that's one positive. And you're right about the timing. In some rehearsals I feel that they almost have it down, and then we have a day like today which shows that they're not ready yet. Well, we have 3 more rehearsals to work on it. He sighed. What are you doing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings? I'm free, if you think that I can help. He smiled at me. You're hired. Maybe, between the two of us, we can get it done by Friday. Debbie had come from the backstage area and was standing nearby listening. Mr. Tucker realized that she was waiting for me and said, "I guess your ride is here. I'll see you on Tuesday. Good night, Crystal." Good night, Mr. Tucker. I hurried to the wardrobe to pick up the dress and grab my coat and purse. Barbara had added a floor-length coat to my pile of borrowed clothing. It was a heavy, black, satiny material that was actually more like a cape with slits for my arms rather than a coat. When I returned to where Debbie was waiting near the stage exit, she noticed the dress through the clear plastic bag. "Is that the dress that you wore on our date last summer?" she asked in a low voice. "Yes. I'm going to wear it for the play's premiere. Just as I expected to do for the last play." She smiled. "Great. I thought that it was stunning on you, but I won't be there to help you walk this time." "That's okay. I'm going to attend with Brad." And I had Barbara let the dress out a little. "Brad?" "Yes. Brad. I told you about him." As we left the theater and walked towards her car, Debbie said, "Are you serious about this guy?" I hesitated for a moment and then said, "Brad's a nice guy and I like him. I started out dating him as a cover because I couldn't hide out in the house all of the time. And things have sort of gotten out of hand." We reached the car and got in before I continued. I told Debbie about the ID bracelet and about Brad giving me his class ring. "It sounds like this guy is serious. I really haven't done anything to encourage him. Things just kind of happened, and I don't want to see him hurt in any way. In a few months he'll be leaving for college, and that will probably be the end of it, if it doesn't end sooner." Debbie was quiet for a couple of minutes. We drove along in silence until she said, "Does he know about you?" I was startled by her question. I replied in a hushed tone, "Of course not. Only my family and closest friends know." "Then he hasn't tried to?" "No, he hasn't. Well, he did grope me a bit when we first met, but I put a stop to that. I didn't go out with him again until Carol said that he would behave if I relented." "And he hasn't tried anything since?" "I just said that he hasn't." That's bad." I looked at her questioningly. "What's bad about it?" "When a good-looking, popular, teenage boy who can get almost any girl in school behaves himself, it can only mean one thing. His feelings for you are strong enough to keep his raging hormones in check. In other words, he's really in love. I suppose he thinks that he is, but that will pass. Next year he'll be surrounded by adoring college coeds. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I act like a normal girlfriend. We can have fun together, without having sex. As I said before, I do like Brad. He's kind, considerate, generous, and he's a good kisser." Debbie turned her head and looked at me. "A good kisser? Better than me?" I knew that my next words were critical to my relationship with Debbie, so I said, "Nobody is better than you. I can't wait until we can go to Grandma's house again." Debbie smiled. "I'm looking forward to that also. We have a date for the first Saturday after the play is over. Then I hope that the play doesn't run as long as last summer's did. Not a chance, without you in it." We had reached my house. I leaned over and pecked Debbie on the cheek. "Thanks for the ride home. I'll see you on Tuesday, and dream about being at Grandma's house." "Me, too." I got out and walked to the front door of the house. Debbie waited until I started to enter before driving off, and I waved as she pulled away from the curb. I worked with Mr. Tucker and the cast for 3 evenings during the following week. Tuesday and Wednesday were full dress rehearsals, and Thursday was full dress and makeup. By the time that we wrapped for the night on Thursday, the cast seemed to be performing with almost professional confidence and timing. Mr. Tucker's skill as a teacher and director were unparalleled in my opinion and within my limited experience. I welcomed every opportunity to work with him and to learn from him. Many aspiring actors paid high tuition fees at popular acting schools to study under teachers who were no more qualified than Mr. Tucker. After school on Friday, I hurried home and began getting ready for my date with Brad and the premiere performance of the play. I bathed, did my fingernails and toenails, and worked on my face in an attempt to get my makeup perfect. Carol helped me with my hair. I wore my locket and the matching earrings that I had bought. I was also wearing a rhinestone bracelet that Carol had loaned me, over the long, opera-length gloves. The low cut of the dress highlighted not only my breasts, but the locket as well. I had to wear 4.5-inch heels to keep the dress from dragging on the ground. I smiled as I thought back to the last time that I had worn this dress. In addition to the corset needed to get my waist down to what feels like 18 inches, I had been wearing the original breast forms, and the padded panty girdle that gave me a shapelier bottom while helping to hide my secret. Now, thanks to the medications that I took, I had my own padding, both on top and bottom, and there was no secret to hide. The dress fit me like a glove, and only the corset made me feel unnatural, since everything else was me. I was just finishing up when I heard the doorbell, so I finished applying my lipstick, spayed on my scent, and went down to greet Brad. I found him in the living room, talking with Mom. He stood as I entered and smiled at me. I was shocked. He was wearing a tuxedo and looked like he had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. "You're beautiful," he said. "So are you." I only expected a suit. Dad told me that for a play's premiere I should wear formal attire. After seeing you, I'm really glad that I did. I would feel out of place being with you while you're wearing that dress. You look great. Brad turned and picked up a small box that was on his coat. He opened it and took out a corsage. He handed it to me so that I could pin it on. Mom helped me, and when we were done, I said to Brad, "Thank you. Shall we go?" Mom stopped us with, "Not yet, I want some pictures." I have my camera all ready to go. So we spent about 10 more minutes at the house as Mom posed us this way and that until she had shot an entire roll and I was seeing stars from the flash. I motioned to Brad that it was time to leave as Mom took the roll of film out of her camera. Brad lifted the cape onto my shoulders and then buttoned the top button as he faced me. He struggled into his own coat as I adjusted the cape and picked up my purse, and we left after saying goodnight to Mom. Then I got my second shock of the evening. Instead of the expected 4x4, there was a white, stretch limo waiting in front of the house. I smiled as Brad opened the door and helped me in. Once I was seated, Brad stepped in and sat beside me. As soon as the door was closed, the driver started to pull away from the curb. 10 minutes later we pulled up in front of the theater. There were only a few people out front because of the cold of the night, but the lobby was full. As we stepped out of the limo, I saw faces pressed against the glass of the front doors. The faces, and accompanying bodies, parted as I took Brad's arm and we entered the theater. I felt like royalty as a path opened up in front of us. The whispers turned to light applause as Brad and I walked through the lobby. I smiled and waved to everyone. The applause grew as we entered the theater. An usher led us down to our seats in the center of the front row. Brad helped me off with the cape, and the usher, Stephen Boggs, took my cape and Brad's coat and carried them away. I'm sure that the special treatment did not go unnoticed since it seemed that every pair of eyes in the partially filled house was upon us. No sooner had we taken our seats than autograph seekers began to congregate around us. Stephen returned and helped to keep them from pressing too closely as I signed autograph books, programs, and whatever assorted pieces of paper that people had on them. As the house lights dimmed to signal that the play was about to start, I finished up with the last of the seekers, and Stephen shooed them away. The house lights dipped further just before Mr. Tucker stepped onto the stage to give his welcome and introduction. Looking very distinguished, he smiled warmly as he began with a series of jokes and anecdotes designed to warm up the audience. He spent about 5 minutes on stage before beginning his closing remarks. I was surprised to hear a reference to me as he remarked how much I had helped as an assistant director. He further surprised me by calling me to stand up and wave. A spotlight popped on and swung down to me, and I stood, smiled, and waved to the audience amidst loud applause. As I turned to sit back down, Mr. Tucker began his final comments and walked off of the stage to more loud applause. The curtains opened a few seconds after Mr. Tucker had left the stage, and the play began. Despite opening night jitters, the cast did an excellent job. There was a short intermission between each of the acts, and few more autograph seekers came around during each. Stephen stood by each time. I didn't know it at the time, but Mr. Tucker had given him instructions to stay near to me, or to watch out for me, while I was in the theater. I'm sure that between him and Brad, no one would ever get very close. At the conclusion of the play, the audience gave a thunderous applause and the cast received 6 curtain calls. They had done a wonderful job and deserved every bit of the adulation that fans could shower upon them. As unpaid performers, the response of the audience is the primary reward. Stephen returned as the house lights came up and the audience stood to prepare to leave. After being escorted to the backstage area, I made the rounds congratulating everyone on a wonderful performance and introducing them to Brad. I was using Brad's arm for support as we circulated, because of the restrictions of the dress and my heels. Debbie seemed to glare a little at Brad when I introduced them, but then she smiled when she saw me scrutinizing her face. We spent about a half hour with the cast and crew before I sensed that Brad was getting anxious to leave, so I said my goodbyes and we left. People leaving a theater after a performance usually go for drinks and dancing, but since we were underage, that was out. Also, I had to be home by midnight and it was almost 11. Brad decided the issue by telling the driver to take us to his house. When we got out, he told the driver that we were done for the evening and that he could leave. Brad escorted me into the house and helped me off with my cape. I had known Brad long enough now that I trusted him without needing an explanation for every little action, but I wondered if this was leading up to something. I suspected that Brad wanted to spend a little time in close, personal contact, and since he had been such a good escort tonight, I decided to reward him a little. I said, "I have to be home by midnight, Brad." He replied, "No problem," as he led me into the living room. A single, small lamp, illuminating the large painting of his grandparents over the fireplace, barely lit the room well enough to walk to the sofa without bumping into furniture. Brad and I sat down and he wasted little time in pinning me to the back of the sofa as he began his assault on my lipstick. As always, I kept his hands from straying too far, but I did allow him to touch my breasts a few times as we kissed. The sensation was quite unusual now that there wasn't any plastic covering on my skin there. I clearly felt every touch and felt my breasts responding to his caress. As I had told Debbie, Brad was a good kisser, and I felt myself relaxing in his arms and returning his ardor. A couple of times, Brad dropped his hand to my leg, but I quickly removed it. There was a clock on the mantel of the fireplace, and the face was illuminated enough for me to watch the time. At 11:45, I started pushing Brad away. It took several minutes for him to get himself under control enough to pull back. "Brad, I have to be home at midnight. It's time to go." "Just a few more minutes." "No, it's almost 10 minutes off." "Oh, okay." He sat back and straightened his jacket. I knew that he wasn't happy about having to stop, but we had gone about as far as I could permit. I grabbed my purse and cleaned up my lipstick and tried to straighten my hair a little. It's amazing how quickly you can become disarrayed when you're only kissing. As Brad went outside to warm up the 4x4 for a couple of minutes, I waited inside the house. When he returned, he helped me with the cape and we left for my house. It was just 1 minute before midnight when we arrived and I allowed Brad to spend the minute kissing me. Afterwards he hurried around to my door and lifted me out. Kicking the door closed with his foot, he carried me to the front door and we shared one last quick kiss before I went inside. I reflected on the night's activities as I slowly climbed the stairs to my bedroom. I was very confused about my own feelings, and, as I had for some time, felt trapped between two worlds. On the one hand was my affection for Debbie, and on the other was my growing fondness for Brad. I knew that, having been born a male, I shouldn't feel any tenderness for Brad, but then, I wasn't really a male anymore. In fact, except when I spent time in introspection, I never even thought of myself as a male. I had become so indoctrinated to comport myself as a female by the world at large, since adopting my disguise, that I had lost all touch with the reality of my birth gender. Having real breasts and no visible male genitalia only served to further inculcate the self-identification of a woman on my psyche. Unlike female impersonators who changed back to their male identity after a performance, I had never re-established contact with my male side since my first day as Crystal. Was it any wonder that I was losing touch with that former side of me? Was it any wonder that I tended only to think of myself as a female these days? Could I, ever go back? Did I even want to? These had been my thoughts as I prepared for bed. Mom was asleep and Carol wasn't home yet, so I slid into bed still wearing the corset beneath my nightgown. The dress had required that I get down to 18 inches and there wasn't any way that I could loosen the corset by myself. As I tried to get comfortable, I forgot my original identity again for a moment as I thought aloud about what we women go through to look alluring to men. I snapped back to the reality of my existence as I realized what I had just said to myself. I began to wonder if the day would come when I would lose all conscious thought of my male identity. Would I get so immersed in my role as a woman that I would forget Carrie completely? It seemed that I was almost there now. Did that explain why I enjoyed kissing Brad and felt so comfortable in his arms? The discomfort of the corset and the discomfort in my mind resulted in a troubled sleep. The following morning, Carol invited me to go to the mall with her, Heather, and Sherry, so I donned my disguise and we left around noon. I had found new pleasures in going to the mall since finding that my disguise allowed me to shop in peace. We had a great time and we got back early enough so that I could get to the theater in time to help out. Brad had wanted to go out again tonight, but I had put him off with the explanation that I was committed to helping out backstage while the play was in production. When I ran into Debbie after arriving at the theater, she looked around and said, "Where's the hunk?" "Brad?" She nodded. "He's not with me. I'm here to work." "I'm glad that you could tear yourself away." I smiled. "You know that I had to hang on to him for support. Just as I had to hang on to Michael last year." She gave me a wry look. "I guess. It's just that you looked like you were hanging on for more than just support." "Like for what?" She looked like she was about to say something but then hesitated. "Forget it." "No. Tell me what you meant." "Okay. It's just that you looked like a love-struck cow." I laughed. "Oh, come on. You're just jealous." "Maybe, but not of you." "Of him." "That's sweet. I love you too. But we can't be seen together." "I know." Debbie trailed her words off as several cast members came in. Seeing us standing there, they came over and joined the conversation, so we had to change the subject. I congratulated them all again on last night's performance. Before long, we were talking about last night's individual performances. As the only one there who had seen the play from the audience seating, I was asked if I spotted any deficiencies. Running through the performance in my mind, I mentioned several things that I felt would improve the production. I stressed that the changes were so minor because everyone had done such a wonderful job that it was fine as it was. As I talked, more and more of the company arrived and crowded around to listen. I saw Mr. Tucker come in and listen for a couple of minutes before clapping his hands and announcing, "Okay, everyone. Time to start getting ready for tonight's performance. The curtain goes up in only 45 minutes. The group seemed to turn as one body and begin moving towards the wardrobe and makeup areas. I followed along with Debbie and helped out wherever I was needed over the next few hours. The show was another success and the audience showed their appreciation at the end. I got a ride home from Debbie and we continued to sit in the car and talk after we arrived at my house. This isn't fair, Debbie said. It's the way that it is. If people see us together, they'll think that we are lesbians. Your reputation and my acting career will be seriously damaged. You may be right, but are you sure that that's the only reason? Everyone at the theater is saying that you and Brad make such a cute couple. They are. Yes, except maybe Rick. I think that he's still carrying a torch for you. That's silly. Rick is just a friend. Don't be naive, cries. Rick has had a thing for you since last summer. If you weren't 16, you'd have to beat him off with a stick to get rid of him. I haven't encouraged him. Guys don't always need encouragement. But it doesn't matter. I saw you first. Debbie tried to pull me towards her, but I resisted. No. The neighbors can all see us here. It'll have to wait until we go to Grandma's house. I bent over and gave Debbie a quick peck on the lips. I have to go in. Thanks for the ride. Welcome, she said glumly. Good night. I got out and walked up to the house. Debbie waited until I had opened the front door before waving and pulling away. Mom was watching TV in the living room and I joined her after putting my coat away. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey. How'd it go? Great. The audience ate it up. I spent most of my time working on makeup. There was a little pause while she listened to the TV show, then she said, Mr. Daniels called today. I felt my heart start to beat a little faster. Did he? What did he say? He wants us to be in New York on Tuesday. Tuesday? This Tuesday? So quick? Well, I did tell him that your schedule was wide open the last time that we talked. I thought for a minute. That's okay. I guess that he would know if I needed any preparation. What's the job? There's 2 things lined up right now and he's working on 2 more. He said that we should plan on being there for 3 weeks. First up is a commercial for a car company, and the second is a commercial for a tuna fish company. Both ad agencies liked your work in Oliver on board, so your exposure is paying off even if the show was canceled. Great. Is Carol going? Of course. Mr. Daniels wanted us to come Monday, but I told him that we had too many things to arrange before we could leave. I washed all the dirty laundry today so that we can start packing tomorrow. On Monday, you and Carol will have to get your homework assignments for the month. I'll take care of the other details for our absence. Sounds great, Mom. Did Mr. Daniels indicate what the other things are that he's working on? No, he didn't. I gave my approval for the 2 commercials after he described what they are looking to do, but were not committed to the other things. Even so, I know that he wouldn't arrange anything that wasn't appropriate. I know. I'm just curious. Well, I'm tired, so I'm going to bed. Good night, Mom. Good night, honey. I began thinking about all of the things that had to be done before we left. I would have to call Brad if he didn't phone me tomorrow. I would also have to tell everyone at the theater. The basketball season was well underway, so I will have to tell the cheerleader squad that Carol and I will be away for a few weeks. I had been excused from the games until the school play was over, but Carol had been working the games since they started. I had only worked 2 games since the play ended. I immediately began thinking of the clothes that I would need to bring with me, so I dug out my list from the California trip and began reviewing it. All of the clothes would be different due to the different climate, but the old list would serve as a good basis for the new list, for everything else. My final thoughts before falling asleep were that the trip would give me some time away to consider my personal relationships. Things with Brad had definitely been moving too fast. A few weeks of separation might cool things a little, and it might also help with Debbie since she was acting a little weird about our relationship lately. Yes. A few weeks away would be good. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment. Thanks.